An intense political year. It is finally a new year, but that also means there may be some new problems that will arise as everyone gets settled.
Yeah, here in the Tar Heel State, we've got a new governor, a new House Speaker, and a new Senate Minority Leader, along with many other local levels of leadership. And of course, let's not forget the switch at the White House. Joining us this morning to break it down here locally, Dr. Susan Roberts from Davidson College. Dr. Roberts, first of all, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
All right, so we got a lot, yes, up in Washington, as we mentioned, but here on the local level, we've got a new governor, Governor Josh Stein, who will be, of course, inaugurated this coming Saturday. When you look at the state level, what do you think about, from the governor's perspective, his vision, his plan for at least the next 6 months here in North Carolina?
Well, I think he needs to work on 6 months, because I think if you look at the national level, members of Congress and at the House level, the state level are always seeking re-election. So the window to get things done is very short. And I think there'll be a flurry of activity. I think the budget will still be a big concern. And as all your listeners and viewers know, Helene will be the hot issue right off the bat. But I don't think it's as simple as it was immediately after the disaster.
Dr. Roberts, you kind of touched on, that's the one thing I think everybody in Raleigh agrees on. There needs to be help, or more help, for Western North Carolina. How they get that done, though, is where things get sticky. With the Republicans losing the supermajority, do you think there might be a little more incentive to maybe get something bipartisan working?
No. I think that the idea of bipartisanship, if you look at it with broad bipartisan support, I think there'll be some cherry picking, because I think right now it's how to work that, I guess it's $10 billion into the budget to really buttress that rainy day fund. I think you will have some dissension. I think some Republicans, 2 or 3, thought that from Western North Carolina, there wasn't enough in the bill that was passed that really was directed to disaster relief. And I think that one of the things I thought about is the Riggs Griffin election, whatever the outcome is. That to me is indicative of how things are going to go in North Carolina for the next 2 years.
Kind of explain why that is so important. Of course, if Riggs wins, then it will stay the 5-2 Republican majority on the Senate. It would be 6-1, though, if Judge Griffin actually wins. What are the ramifications of either person winning that seat? Why is that so important?
Well, I think the majority issue is important, but I also think it means that issues such as voter reform will continue to come up. And I think it just means that how bitter the partisanship is in North Carolina. It may not have a lot of impact directly on policy, but I think if one expects some of the culture war issues to come up and some other issues within the state, I think it is important. It's also important about the balance of power. And it is slim everywhere. It is slim in the U.S. Capitol. It is slim in Raleigh.
Talking about the new leadership there that we're going to see in the House, obviously we have the new Speaker in Destin Hall, because Tim Moore's gone up to the U.S. Senate now. So or Congress, I should say. Looking at that, is there going to be a change in anything, or is it kind of much the same in terms of the fighting between Republicans and Democrats? Sure, a new Speaker, but it's kind of the same playbook.
Sure. And I think the one thing that has come up that I don't have firsthand information about is the degree to which Hall and Stein can work together, their capability for consensus building. And I think that the two parties need to really demonstrate some willingness, not just to cherry pick, which is pull off a Republican or, to vote with Stein's issues or something, but to really make it a general issue. And some of the issues that are going to confront North Carolina are the same thing that are going to confront Trump. And that is, how will an emphasis on tariffs affect North Carolina? And that's something that should really generate bipartisanship in North Carolina. Whether or not it does, there's only so much they can do. But I think the emphasis, the influence on soybeans, agriculture, a number of things, certain industries will be not be marginal.
I want to ask Dr. Roberts. We were talking about the balance of power, how the supermajority is now lost with the Republicans here in North Carolina. So, of course, it's going to be more difficult to override a governor veto. Where do you see the first stalemate happening between Governor Stein and the Republicans in North Carolina as we start this new year? Where do you see that happening?
I think some of it will be Medicaid expansion and I guess what kind of impact that and Helene relief will have on education and others. Helene may not be the sticking point. I may have overstated that case, but I think it's going to be something that has to do with money. If something hits your, gets your attention, and then sometimes it wanes in terms of that as a priority. I think we will continue to see that, but I think the representatives from Western North Carolina have really emphasized you're not doing enough. And I think the magnitude of the disaster was so great that people don't realize this is still going on. This is winter. People are suffering.
You hit the nail right on the head there, Dr. Roberts. Again, thank you for joining us this morning. The next 6 months crucial to see how the legislators up in Raleigh can get things done. Dr. Roberts, we appreciate you being on with us this morning.
Thank you.